to another class of PLAR history/geography here at WASA. Once again, my name is Jonathan and I am a teacher for this course. So we're wrapping up week number 2 for this term, term 2B. It is Thursday, currently snowing outside on this April the 27th, currently just after 4 o'clock p.m. local time. Again, like always, feel free to call in and listen and participate live in class right now. Again, you can simply do that by simply just calling in the WASO studio. Again, you can do that at the Learning Center or at home. Or you can always log on to Smart Bridget as well. And that way you can see what I'm seeing and engage with us that way as well. Again, my contact information is on the screen. You can get a hold of me or in touch with me at any point. Your teacher, Jonathan, again, by phone call, email, fax, Facebook. Again, if you have any questions, difficulties, concerns with your assignments or for this course, just let me know. Again, just a reminder, I'm going to do this every single class from now on. The last official day to submit any work is Friday, June the 16th. Again, make a mental note of that, write it down, circle it in your calendar. But again, this is the last official day to submit any PLAR work. Again, not just for PLAR history/geography, but that includes the English, math, and science as well. So again, last day to submit any PLAR work is Friday, June the 16th. Anything that's submitted after this date will not be marked until after September once we all return. So again, hopefully we can finish up all of our assignments before then. We can write the test before then, and then boom, we can just move on. But again, Friday, June the 16th is the last official day to submit any work for PLAR. Alright, so last class, we talked about World War I. We didn't quite finish, well, we kind of finished most of it, but there's just one slide that I just want to wrap things up before we switch gears and move along with today's class notes. So again, like I said, last class we looked at Canada and World War I, Canada's contributions, its involvement, what caused World War I, the factors, the outcome, who got involved, certain battles, and key significant events. So just to summarize Canada's legacy during World War I. Again, there was unprecedented amount of voluntary support. Once again, there was also unprecedented government involvement in Canadian lives, again due to conscription. It was a period beginning of the Canadian social welfare. Britain realized that it needed Canada. It was one of our biggest allies, and we did a great job supporting overseas during battles and at home during the home front as well. Canada signed on the Treaty of Versailles as an independent nation. Again, we're growing as our identity as an independent nation. But we're not quite there yet, but again, we're slowly making progress with that. World War I proves that Canada is a nation of the world, again, making a name for ourselves. Overseas, like I mentioned, we fought extremely well. Our soldier represented Canada extremely well and even won a couple battles as well. So again, great job with that. Again, huge contribution on the home front. Again, that took place back here in Canada. That includes any men that did not qualify to go to war or battle. That include women of all ages stepping up, breaking down those gender barriers and stepping out into the workforce and factories. And that also includes children as well. Again, doing whatever they can to produce food, weapons, supplies, spread the word to help make the war effort successful. But not everything was positive. Again, there were also a lot of racism, prejudice that was still going on within Canada, which we'll continue to look at as we progress throughout this history portion for this course. So again, that pretty much just sums up what we talked about last class. Again, I just want to make that note as we didn't quite finish. Again, that was for assignment number 2. So again, if you want to spend some time now to look over those questions, sure, why not? Let's do that right now. But again, like always, my expectations for history, geography are just straightforward, simple. Again, we're always trying to improve our literacy skills, how we articulate our thinking and writing, and how we communicate our thoughts. But again, I'm looking for full, complete sentences with lots of details. Again, don't just copy straight from the textbook, even though the answers are there. Use them, but just rephrase them into your own words. Just answer what's being asked. Don't copy out the whole paragraph. Again, if you're confused about that, let me know. Submit an example. I'll definitely give you feedback, and then we can improve upon that as well. So just to quickly go over assignment number 2 questions before we switch gears. Again, what was conscription? Again, just looking for details. So simply, you can start off by saying something like this: conscription was when, again, dot, 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 your answer. Okay? Question number 2, name 2 battles that were mentioned in your textbook. Again, you can say two battles Again, this is just an example. You don't have to write like this, but I can start by saying two battles that were mentioned in a textbook were this and that, and why they were significant, and give details. Again, describe income war tax. Question number 4, what was the guilt cause? What did Germany have to do after the war? And question number 5, the League of Nations and its purpose. Again, really straightforward in terms of assignment number 2. It should take you roughly around 15, maybe 20 minutes or so, depending on our learning styles and needs. But again, it shouldn't take us that long. Again, any questions, you know where to find me, you know where to get a hold of me. Really straightforward. All right, class. So today, over the next 60 minutes, we will wrap up lesson number 1. Okay. So today's class, we're looking at Canada between the wars. In other words, what took place between World War I and World War II. In other words, the periods of the 20s and the 30s. That's our main focus for today's class. What happened, what transpired within these decades. Okay. So again, shifting our mindset within this time period and just moving along our timeline. So let's get to today's class learning goals and our success criteria. Again, our learning goals are the direction where we're heading for today's class. And our success criteria is when you will self-reflect so that you can determine when you will be successful based on your knowledge and understanding. So our learning goals are, again, you and I are learning about the concept of continuity and change that makes history complex in Canada in the 1920s and the 1930s. And we'll also evaluate the Great Depression. In other words, what was the Great Depression? Was it significant? Why was it significant? What was it? What was the impact? We'll evaluate the Great Depression. For your success criteria, you can simply say, I know I am successful when I can assess how events may involve progress for some people or group and how it declined for others as well. So again, not everyone made strides in progress. We'll also communicate our thinking using writing tools. Again, that just go towards your assignments, how you again articulate your critical thinking skills and your knowledge and applications as well. And finally, identify the causes of the Great Depression. Again, another major theme that we're going to talk about as well. And if we have time, we'll also discuss about women's rights and women's rights to vote if we have time. But again, if we don't, we'll just continue off in the next class. Are there any questions? Again, feel free to call in the Wasser Studio. Again, we'll put you on the line. That way you can listen, say hello, communicate, ask questions. Again, you can always log on to Smart Bridget as well. Again, type out your questions if you have any confusion as well. And there we go. We have Bridget Adams once again on with us from Round Lake. Again, thank you, Bridget, for logging on to Smart Bridget. Again, I know that you don't have a microphone. Again, I'm trying to figure out if there's a way. There should be a way if you're on your iPad that you can still open up the mic feature and still communicate that way and still listen. But if not, again, you can always type out your questions if you have any comments or concern. With that being said, Bridget, have you finished assignment number 2 yet? And if you have you submitted it yet? Again, hopefully Bridget is there. She can hear us, and hopefully she will reply back to see if she has completed assignment number 2, or if she has any questions in regards to that. But again, class, again, feel free to just ask questions at any point. Again, this is your class. We want to make it around your needs as well. So let's begin today's class with a little fun activity. Uh, Slang. Name 3 slang terms that you use today and what do they mean? Again, a lot of us, send text message and emojis and all these different slang terminologies that I don't even know about even today. But what 3 slang terms that you use today and what do they mean? Again, it could be any slang term. Uh, Whether or not I know it or do not know it. Name 3 slang. Feel free to share with the class. Again, discuss it with your colleagues, your students. If you have anyone around you, discuss it with your family member or your DEC. But what 3 slang terms that you use and what do they mean? For example, I sometimes use LOL, if that's even a slang term. But other than that, I don't really use too many slang terms. But again, are there any slang terms that you use today? Um, Here's another one that I don't really use, but a lot of people use, that LMAO. Is that one? Yeah? Yeah? Is that one? Do you use that, Merrick? Yeah? What else do you use, Merrick? What are slang term that kids use nowadays in a classroom that I may know or do not know about? You don't know? Okay. Well, hopefully it'll get you start thinking about. But the purpose of this little activity is just to get you thinking and put you in the mindset of the 1920s. Okay, we're in the 1920s. Again, I know emojis are definitely something that's starting to take over slang. Who knows? But back in the 1920s, there were a lot of slang terms that are used back then, but not necessarily today. So on my screen, I've got some examples. We got the bee's knees. Do we use that today? Probably not. We got ducky. What does that mean? Any thoughts? Any guesses? And we got Raz. Okay, so on my screen I got 3 slang terms that were used back in 1920s. Are there any guesses about what they mean? And do we even use them today? So the bee's knees, well, it was a term used back in the 1920s that states an extraordinary person, thing, idea, or something that was just simply ultimate or fantastic. Okay, so if you were called the bee's knees back in 1920s, which means that you are an outstanding, extraordinary person or a thing. All right, any guesses for ducky? Well, ducky simply means very good. Okay, very good. So if I wrote ducky on your assignments, for example, which means very good, you did extremely well or good in general. And what does Raz mean? Okay, we definitely don't use Raz. Okay, but Raz in 1920 is states something to make fun of. Okay, if someone said Raz back in 1920s, they were trying to make fun of something. Okay, so slang often reflects youth culture from a specific time period. The 1920s was a time of change. Okay, the war ended in 1918, and as we progressed into the 20s, it was a time of change after a difficult war period. So again, yeah, a lot of slang. Again, we don't necessarily use these terms, for example, bee's knees, ducky, and raz, but we still accommodate new slang terms at each time period or decades goes along. Again, something to think about as we continue throughout today's class. Awesome. So Bridget is still currently working on assignment 2, which is all right. Again, it shouldn't take us that long to complete it. But again, try your best to get it done. But today we're just focused on assignment number 3 questions. But again, if you have any questions, Bridget, you need time to work on it together, we can certainly put that aside and get that done as well. But again, keep up the hard work. Again, I know we all have busy lives and other commitments. No worries at all. But again, just try your best to just chip away at each assignment as you can. Okay? But again, also that goes for everyone. Again, once it's done, just do your best to submit them to me. That way I know you're active. That way I know that you're progressing well. Uh, and there's no any difficulties. Because if there are, we want to make sure that we fix it, improve upon it, so that it doesn't reflect on future assignments as well. Okay? Awesome. Bridget, do you use any slang terms within your community? Anything that stands out and that's exciting? Can't think of anything, Merrick? No, nothing. Which what was that?
NP for no problem.
Oh, okay. Uh, yeah, that could be a slang term. It's more like a short form, but yeah, that's a good example. So Merrick gave the example of NP, which stands for no problem. I guess it could be a slang term. It's more like a short form, but people wrote thanks, asking like not even thanks, but wrote thanks. I don't know, or BRB. Oh, that's a good one. BRB, BRB. Yeah. Jiffy. Like I'll be back in a jiffy. What does that mean? What does that mean, Bridget? What does jiffy mean? Like I'll be right back kind of thing? Again, slang could be absolutely anything. Like it could be something, a word that you and your friends or family use often. Okay, I'll be back quick. Okay. So it's almost like BRB. Okay, be right back. I know that was popular when I was growing up. But again, some of these phrases we can continue using in 5, 10 years. They could be completely gone. We could just adopt something new within 5, 10 years. But again, it just reflects the culture, the community, how we communicate with one another. So again, as I said on my screen, we got the bee's knees, ducky, and ras, kind of slang terms in the 1920s. Awesome. So thank you, Merrick. Thank you, Bridget, for participating. But again, it's really unique. Again, I learned something new as well. Hopefully you learned some of these new terms as well. But Jiffy, I'll be back quickly or quick. Interesting. Good stuff. Well done. So understanding 20s, let's skip through that slide. I want to get to just the main point. So the 20s. The 20s was often called the Roaring Twenties. It gets its name from the burst in entertainment, technology, dance, music, and change in fashion for women. The question remains, however, did the 20s war for everyone? What do you think? What do you think? Well, I also kind of have to answer my screen, but do you think that it was a period of excitement for everyone? If not, then why so? Okay, something to keep in mind. So again, the 1920s was called the Decade of Hope or the Roaring Twenties. Okay, again, the war ended in 1918. Family members came home overseas. Everyone's excited and thrilled. Again, lots of excitement, prosperity, and simply just good times. Okay, it was good times. War was over and a lot of good times. For the upper and middle class, again, excitement and opportunities as they could afford new technologies, again, such as the radio, refrigerator, television, and even cars. Whereas for the working class or the poor class, it was a period of disappointment, a period of uncertainty and insecurity, as they did not really know what the future lay ahead because they didn't have financial means to purchase all the new technology that was going on. So in other words, the 20s did not war for everyone. Yes, for the middle class and upper class, if they could afford it, sure, it was time for excitement. But if you couldn't afford it, then it was just kind of disappointment. A lot of disappointment. Again, why was it called the Roaring Twenties? Well, it was an increase in industry, urbanization. We had the telephone. Okay, the telephone, not the cell phone, but the telephone. We had the automobile, cars. Again, cars start to come in different colors, different models. Again, that increased rules and regulations for the road. It increased travel, excitement. The radio. Listen to your top 40 music or any other stations that you like. But again, that emerged in the 20s as well. Electricity. Again, that started to boom and increase as well. There were advancement in technology and medicine, such as insulin as well. The stock market grew and doubled in value. So again, if it was something that you do or invested in the market, it was good times to invest in the market back then. There was definitely no signs of slowing down. It kept growing and growing, and people started to make money at a fast rate. That it didn't happen before. But again, that is why it was called the Roaring Twenties. Again, a lot of new technologies and means came out. If you could afford it, great. If you can't, then c'est la vie. Again, technology in the 20s were more about refrigerator, the television, and the radio. Those kind of technologies were coming out in the 1920s. Again, not so much about internet or laptops and computers. That came a bit later on. But again, it was start of the telephone. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. Again, Ford started to make different car models back then. Again, we can definitely talk about cars all day long. That was just like another lecture on its own. But cars was something that was really big. It represented adventure, excitement, travel, new opportunities. Again, just the radio. Again, so that we can start hear different music, news from different areas around the world, even areas within the countries and the communities as well. So that's what I mean by new technology back in the 1920s. So again, hopefully that answers your question, Bridget. If it doesn't, just let me know. Hopefully I can give you more examples as well. But in Canadian society back then, there were something that I really want to highlight was that there were more have-nots than haves. Even though there were a lot of technologies and at times of excitement and times of opportunity and prosperity, there were more have-nots than have. Okay, not a lot of people could afford it. Not a lot of people could own it. But again, even though it was there, people were making money and investing in the market. It was more have-nots than haves. But again, that's a great question as well, Bridget, in terms of asking about technology. As we know, technology is always increasing and improving. Even looking at today, we have this technology of smart Bridget and smart board, where you can log on to this conference that we're doing in terms of distance education. Again, we have cell phone, different apps. Technology is always improving, always improving. So how did the 1920s ended? Well, it finished how it pretty much started. Canada was caught up in a recession. The term of being modern was not as important as having a job, food, and shelter. So again, going back to this basic necessity of job, food, and shelter was more important than having all those fancy technologies. So again, if the middle class and upper class can afford it, sure, great, but the majority of Canadians were not able to afford it. Even though it was a time of excitement and prosperity, there were still times of struggles. But again, that goes just back to how people had money to spend. We had new music such as jazz music, new clothing fashion for women. Canada was really rich in natural resources. Wheat industry doubled in value, and the manufacturer sector boomed as well. So again, a lot of excitement that started to increase within the 20s. So some indigenous content within the 1920s, well, something that really stood out was residential school. Okay, residential school. Again, I'm not going to go into huge detail, make a huge lesson about residential school, but again, I wish I could if we had more time. But for over 100 years in Canada, Aboriginal children were taken from their homes, their culture, their way of life, and were placed in residential schools ran by the churches all over the country under the guidance and legislation of the Canadian government. While some Canadians were experiencing progress, again, mainly the upper class and middle class, Aboriginals were experiencing a decline. So again, going back to that question I posed earlier, did the war in 20s booms for everyone? Again, not so much for Aboriginals. Veterans who served in the war were not recognized, even though they served in the war. Women had been given the right to vote, but Aboriginals still had no say. Again, we'll talk more about that within women's right to vote later on in today's class. Children labor across Canada was deemed illegal, yet Aboriginal Canadian was taken from their homes and forced to learn skilled work to survive in the modern world. So again, just a little example of a much more darker period within Canadian history. Again, whereas some were experiencing progress, whereas others not so much. Survivors of residential school may have suffered many long-term consequences, such as high rate of substance abuse, anxiety, depression, aggression behavior, loss of language, culture, feeling isolated. They did not really fit in, and they didn't really know their culture as well. Again, just some examples that I just want to point out. Again, it's always important that we keep these history and culture alive. I already talked about history, but again, it's very important as well. So again, so that's a bit about residential school. Again, I wish I had we should have more time to really focus on it. But class and students, if it's something that you want to share about, something that you want me to integrate more about or share more about, just let me know and I can always do that as well. We can always spend more time on hand and talk about it as well. But again, I just want to make that point out. Are there any questions about the 1920s? So again, just a little quick snapshot of what took place in the 1920s. Awesome, so good work. So now we're going to quickly talk about the next decade, the 1930s. The 1930s, and otherwise known as the Great Depression period. Okay. Have you heard of the Great Depression before? And if you have, ask yourself this question. Why was it called great? Okay. What made it so great about it? I think we can know what depression means and stand for, but why was it called great? Okay, why was it called great? Hopefully we can answer that question in the next couple of slides, but just something to think about. Okay, what made it so great? Why was it called the Great Depression? So let's talk about it a little bit, and hopefully you will get a greater sense, and hopefully we can answer that question. The Great Depression was a social economic shock that left millions unemployed, hungry, and homeless. Again, if you want to find the Great Depression in your textbook, it is on page, let's find it. Starts on page 6. On page 6. Again, start on page 6, you can see about, talks about a bit kind of the technologies and advancement that took place in the 1920s right here. And down below, you see where it starts looking at the Great Depression. And how it started and what made it so great. But factors that led to the Great Depression were pretty much high tax, economy dependent on exports, overextending credits, heavy debt loans, inefficient financial regulations, misguided government interventions, and public panic. So again, even though there was a lot of excitement, there was still some panic that came out of it. Again, similar to the residential school, the Great Depression was a dark period in Canadian history. Many lives were bruised, shattered, and even broken. But what caused it? What was so dreadful about it? And how did it create fear that would haunt people for a lifetime? Sure, for example, me, was not born within the Great Depression. Maybe our great grandparents were. Uh, but again, something hard to connect unless you actually lived it and experienced it. But again, what caused it? What was so dreadful about it? Again, in other words, why was it called the Great Depression? Okay, what's this all called the Great Depression? So the Great Depression, again, all started back in 1929 when the New York stock market crashed. It left millions of people with no jobs. People were laid off. Companies went bankrupt. About 1/3 of Canadians lost their jobs. Again, the cause of it was that many companies were making more products than people could afford. Again, going back to our knowledge about the 1920s in terms of how industries were booming, a lot of factories and companies were making more products, but again, a lot of Canadians couldn't afford it. Again, this was the factor that led to the Great Depression. Therefore, a lot of people started to sell their stocks as fast as they could once the stock market crashed, as they didn't want to lose so much stocks, so shares or values as well. But again, eventually it left millions with no jobs. People were laid off. bankrupt, not a fun time. The stock market crash was a symptom of economic instability. Again, put yourself in that shoes in terms of if you were working and then a Great Depression happened and then you lost your job. How would that affect yourself, your family, your community? Again, very dark period of time. Again, going back to that question in terms of why was it called the Great Depression? Well, it simply was called great because it didn't just affect Canada, but affected pretty much a lot of countries around the world. Everyone was affected by it. So again, it was a dark period where not many people had jobs, not many people were making monies, and again, it was just not an exciting period of time. Alright, just to summarize the Great Depression into a simpler terms, again, on my screen I have, you see stock market crash. Again, I don't want to get into the whole nonsense or the background content of what was the stock market, how you invest, da da da. But again, people would invest in shares. Again, all that eventually crashed and people started to lose money. People lost money and did not have money to spend. Obviously, does it sound fun? Does it sound good? People started to buy less things. Factories had to lay off workers or close their doors because why keep it open when there's no need to produce product? Unemployment went up. People had to even less money to spend and receive on assistance. Employment went up even further. Sorry, unemployment went up even further. Again, all this led to the Great Depression. Again, you can see like a little cycle, a little chain reaction. Again, all about maintaining that stability of having job and income. And again, if we don't have that, it could be a very difficult time. Farmers, again, the Great Depression affected farmers, where other countries started to produce more grains than Canada. There was a severe drought that happened within Western Canada. Again, a drought simply means no rain, no precipitation. Again, I think it just was super dry and not fun. Grasshopper plague, again, came pretty much out of nowhere. These superbugs like grasshopper came and started to appear and ate crops for the farmers. Again, that destroyed the farming industry as well. And simply people just had to rely on luck. Again, whether or not you had to flip a coin or just rely on luck, people just had to rely on luck back in the day. People couldn't afford fuel. They had to hook up the farm animals to their cars, known as the Bennett buggy. No income, people couldn't pay bills. Again, people had to sell home and even the land. It was just rough times, just rough times. Again, doing whatever they can to survive. Again, it didn't just affect people within the city, but farmers as well were affected. So again, going back to that notion of everyone was affected, and I mean everyone was affected. Everyone felt the effects of the Great Depression. Again, it affected pretty much across Canada. In BC, again, resource-based industry, agriculture dropped in decline. Out east in Newfoundland, well, they were not a part of Canada, so let's not worry about them. Here in Ontario and a bit in Quebec, manufacturing sector were hit the hardest and massive layoffs. Just layoffs. Again, income were down, unemployment were down. It's just not a fun period of time. So because of the Great Depression and what took place in the 1930s, people started to challenge the government. Okay, we called upon our government for relief assistance. In other words, we needed help. Canadian citizens needed help. Something needed to be done. In other words, 1930s can be summed up as not always about the Great Depression, unemployment, relief lines, dust storms, and hobos, but the 1930s was all about a story of society struggles. Okay, society struggles. Again, when looking at history, we can't just talk about the positive. We can't just talk about the negative. We need to talk about both the positive aspect and the negative aspect. Again, history is all about analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating events to piece together a master narrative in terms of what is important and how it impacts us. So, with your understanding of what was the Great Depression, and again, if you want to take time to look through your textbook, again, it's there on page 6 and a bit on page 7. It doesn't go into great details, but it's simply there. So, class, do you think, okay, not what I think, do you think we could have another Great Depression? What do you think? Yes or no? Feel free to share your thoughts, your reason. Do you think we can have a massive unemployment line, massive drop in jobs, bankruptcy? What do you think? What do you think, Merrick? You think we can have another Great Depression? Yeah, you think so? Even though with all our technology nowadays and what can happen, what cannot happen, you never know. Okay? Again, it's not so much what I think, not so much what Merrick thinks, but it's about what do you think? What's your reason behind it? Okay? You can't just say yes or no, but I want you to start thinking critically. Give reason. Okay? Give reasons that you see in your community. Give reasons that you see on the news or what you have experienced. Again, there's no correct answer, but it's just simply giving you a chance to reflect on terms of what do you think? Okay, what do you think? Again, do you think another Great Depression could happen? Again, you see some of these type of questions within your assignments and even on your tests in terms of making you support your reasons with evidence and your thinking with evidence as well. Okay, so something to think about. Something to think about. So how did the 1930s ended? Well, I asked the question, how does the Great Depression change the role in government within Canada? Well, to answer that question, Canadians now expect our government to react when there is a financial crisis that occurs. So again, we need action and intervention. Okay. So again, welfare, assistance, programs. Okay. This is something that we called upon and our government needs to do in order to support us in terms of times of crisis. So again, because of the 1930s, because of the Great Depressions, we now have again social welfare. We have different programs. Again, if we lost a job, we can now collect EI and collect other money from the government. So again, we're not just left in the dust anymore. All right, so are there any questions, concerns, comments, thoughts you want to share, class? We do have about 10 minutes left or so. I'm going to try my best to go through these next couple of slides as fast as I can in a way. I don't want to rush it, but again, if you want me to slow it down or review it next class, we can certainly do that. But again, I do want to talk a bit about women and political concerns. So again, we do have roughly about 10 minutes left, and we'll see if we can get this done. So, political concerns for women. Prohibition. Prohibition means to ban the sale of alcohol consumption. Again, people didn't want to see that happen. And it's all about getting a right to vote. We know how important that is, federally and provincially election as well. The temperance movement. Again, remember that name. They're just simply a group of women who wanted to change society and their point of view. The temperance movement. They wanted to ban and the sale and consumption of alcohol, Why? Because they believed that it was the abuse of alcohol that caused unemployment, disease, prostitution, poverty, immortality for society. Again, the temperance movement was a social and political campaign where groups of women from all major cities across Canada, they came together, they gathered together, they pressured the government to make changes in laws and rules and regulations to reflect their viewpoints. In other words, they just simply had their own ideas on how to improve Canadian society. Again, it could be hospitals, schools, prison. One major group was the Women's Christian Temperance Movement. That was a popular group that gathered together, was created and emerged. But in other words, they just wanted to change society to reflect their viewpoints. Again, women's voice wasn't heard back then, but again, nowadays it's more equal. But again, don't be discouraged. It was just the way it was within that time period. Again, in your textbook, it does talk about the temperance movement. As you scroll down to page number 8 and page number 9. Okay, those two pages talks more about women's role and how they really fought for equality. But again, temperance movement, their suggestions and ideas didn't really work. Again, there were underground cells, bootleggers, smugglers. The government really simply just ignored their suggestions. Even though they wrote petitions and made campaigns, got their word out and voice out, yeah, the government didn't really do too much about it. So in other words, these women, the temperance movement, and these group of women thought that the only way to improve was to gain the right to vote. Okay, to gain the right to vote. Women during this time period did not have the right to vote. Very significant. Again, they held demonstrations, collected names on petition. They wrote articles, newspaper, letters, magazines. They did whatever they can to get their voice heard. But again, not much came about it. Again, it's important to have a voice. That's why within my class, I want each student to have a voice. Again, feel free to share examples, ask questions. Again, like I said, this is your class, and we're trying to make it fun and engaging as well. So again, this is what the temperance movement wanted. And in the end, they achieved their goal. When was the right to vote was won? As you can see on my screen, I have a list of different Canadian provinces and different years beside it. You can see that in 1916, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, women won the right to vote there provincially. In BC, it took place a year later in 1917, and same thing as in Ontario as well in 1917. Women could vote federally in 1917, limitedly, but it did not really come all into play until a year afterwards in 1918. Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, women won the right to vote in 1918, but in PEI, it didn't take place until 1922. And in Quebec, women in Quebec could not vote provincially until 1940. So you can actually see from my screen, there were progress made within each province. Eventually, women won the right to vote in various years. It just took place at different rates, but eventually it took place. However, as you can know, average women were denied the right to vote until 1960. Okay, much later on. Again, going back to that notion of racism and discriminatory and unfair equality and treatment, that took place here as well. Asian women and even Asian men were disfranchised until in the late 1940s. So again, you can just see the progress made, how it was unfair, how different province in terms of women wanted the right to vote differently. There was still a lot of limitation being taken place. Okay. So again, I know we kind of rushed through it, but again, I just want to highlight the key points in terms of the temperance movement and women with the right to votes. questions. So now you should have all the tools and knowledge to complete assignment number 3. Assignment number 3, it's one of the bigger assignments. Big in terms of more questions, nothing significant or anything. First of all, this assignment, you should spend about 20 minutes or half an hour or so, give or take. It will definitely take you about 10-15 minutes more compared to other assignments. But again, that just varies based on our learning skills and needs as well. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So again, question 1, name 3 items or invention that people started to acquire in the 1920s. What happened to cause the Great Depression? Do you think another Great Depression could happen again? Why or why not? Again, kind of a little two-part question there. Describe the challenges farmers had to face during the Great Depression. You see a little chart that talks about gender roles in terms of women and men. Your job here is to just simply outline the tasks for education, employment, and family role. Okay. You can find all this on page number 8 in your textbook. Okay, page number 8. Okay, so in other words, did women go to school? Did women go to university? Did men go to school? Did men go to university? Yes or no? What kind of jobs do women have? What kind of employment? What kind of jobs that men have? Family roles. What were women expected to do within the family? What were men expected to do within the family? Okay. So for the chart, feel free to use jot notes. Just jot down ideas. You don't need to necessarily write full sentences. So just for this chart only. Okay. Everything else, I'm still looking for sentences and details. Question 5, temperance movement. Who were they? What did they focus on? Why did women feel it was important to get the right to vote? And question 7, when did women acquire the right to vote? Looking at provincially and federally. And question number 8, we're comparing women's right today compared to 1990s. Okay, talking about education, employment, and family roles. Okay. So again, class, work on this assignment. Hopefully you can work on it today, tomorrow, over the weekend, and hopefully we can get all done by next week class on Tuesday, okay? If you have done this assignment, great, fantastic. Just continue on, moving on. That's pretty much it. Are there any questions? Any questions there, Bridget? Again, continue to work on all your assignments, okay, class? Again, do your best to get them done, submit them to me. Again, hopefully your goal is to get assignment 1, 2, and 3 all completed by this coming Tuesday, okay? This coming Tuesday. So this coming Tuesday next week number 3, we'll start lesson number 2. We'll start looking at World War II and Canada's involvement and contribution there. And then we'll just continue on, okay? So again, don't try not to fall too far behind with your assignments. Try to catch up as much as you can, okay? All right, class, so enjoy your weekend. Stay warm. Keep up the good work. Again, thank you so much, Bridget, for participating and coming to class. Fantastic job. Again, hopefully we'll continue to see you again in class next week as well. Okay? All right, so I think we'll stop it here for today. Good stuff, everyone. And I will see everyone back here live next week. Thank you so much. Take care now.